Good morning, wise women. We are so excited to have you with us today and to have Greg Wall with us today. I'm going to take 2 minutes of your time to simply remind you that Mercy Learning Center, you know, the kids get lunch when they go to school, so there's no lunches. We need your help. I'm happy to come to your house and pick up whatever you want to give us. Or come to the lobby at 597 and call me. I'll greet you, but I will come. The other thing I want to remind you is Tuesdays at the beach, 597, walking at 10 in the morning for wise women, and then solos with Jane Malakoff. She took pictures last Tuesday, gather at 5 o'clock. Everybody smiling face. Come join us. Okay? Have a great day, and here's Margaret to introduce our speaker.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our next virtual meeting of Wise Women. We're delighted that today we have Rabbi Greg Wall to give a presentation for us. Rabbi Wall is the rabbi at the Westport Synagogue, Beit Chaverim. He also has another career as a musician, and he's combined them all in such an interesting way that he has a fascinating life, which he is going to describe to us today, and we look forward to what he has to say. So I'll hand it over to you now, Rabbi Wall, and we look forward to your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. Good morning, everybody. What an honor to be here, and a shout out to Barbara. She's been working on getting this moment to take place for a couple of years now, and finally it's here. So I'm delighted. And this is no substitute for us meeting in person as soon as it's safe to do that. And I look forward to seeing all of you live and in person. I've been in Westport since 2013. And shortly after I got here, News 12 did a short feature segment talking about my arrival in Westport and my activities, and they did such a good job. I thought that would save a lot of time. I'm just going to show you this little video clip, and then we can have a discussion.
When you think of Judaism, a few things may come to mind.
Amen.
Like prayer.
If we do this,
and teachings.
God is going to intervene.
This is what the congregation at Beit Chaverim Synagogue in Westport expects of their new rabbi, Greg Wall. What they might not have expected is the path Rabbi Wall took to get there.
I think I came to Judaism through jazz, definitely through music.
He's known to many as the jazz rabbi.
I'm an Orthodox rabbi, probably the most unorthodox Orthodox rabbi you'll ever meet.
Rabbi Wall is an accomplished saxophonist who has played professionally since he was in college and has played at top music venues, from Carnegie Hall to Lincoln Center. His music is expressive, honest, passionate.
It has a way of drawing them in. It's rhythmically captivating.
He is in tune with his talents.
Yeah! Amen.
And congregants.
Judaism, to me, is akin to jazz in the way that there's a lot of ways to interpret something. There's a lot of ways to take meaning out of it.
Ironically, he grew up with music, not religion, at home. That path came later in life by chance.
I ended up meeting some Orthodox Jews who were musicians, and seeing a side of Jewish practice I had never seen before, and I was attracted to it.
He and a friend started the group Hasidic New Wave. He's recorded hundreds of albums and has performed all over the world.
We were associated with the Knitting Factory, which was a very popular club in New York, and it also had a record label. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Now he plays gigs locally at places like the Spotted Horse in Westport. His goal is to connect with people.
I am Rabbi Greg. Special today, kosher food available under rabbinic supervision.
With faith as his guide. His divine journey through jazz plays on. In Westport, Catherine Hauser, News 12 Connecticut.
Okay, so there is the short version of my story. And I'll elaborate a little, and of course I'll invite Margaret to keep me pointed in the right direction so I don't go off on a wild tangent. If someone had told me when I was a student at England Conservatory of Music that I was going to end up an Orthodox rabbi, I would have said two things. One, what are you drinking? And second, do you have any more? But it was a wild path, and as I said in the video, I ended up meeting some musicians who brought me back to Jewish practice. But how does that translate into actually being a rabbi? So about 20 years ago, I was spending an awful lot of time performing in Europe. And Europe is set up very well for travel between the countries on trains. And that's the primary way to travel. So a concert tour in Europe inevitably would be to have a concert in one city, perhaps in Belgium, and then you get on the train and you go to Amsterdam, and then maybe you get on the train and you go to Cologne, and then maybe you get on the train and you go to Paris. And of course, the people who booked these tours tended to find, instead of booking them so you had as little amount of time as possible on the train, we would basically spend all day long on the train, getting up really, really early every day. And of course, after the concert, staying up really late to eat dinner and to hang out with the local folks who brought us there to begin with. So it's not as glamorous as one might think being on tour. It's grueling, but the music is the best because we have there are no distractions other than playing your concert and getting to the concert. So what do you do all day on the train? Well, some musicians would sleep. Some musicians would have coffee, play cards. I started studying medieval rabbinic texts. And a couple of years later, I got ordained as a rabbi. That was in 2006. I had no desire to be a congregational rabbi at all. I was a working jazz musician and having a great time and supporting my family. In 2009, I got a phone call. Well, Greg, I have a shul for you, a synagogue. I said, well, I'm not really interested. And he said, this was my friend Ricky Orbach. He said, it's in the East Village. And that made me pause because that was my stomping grounds, my old stomping grounds and current stomping grounds as well. There were a lot of music venues in the East Village. I met my wife in the East Village while I was performing in November of 1988. So I was intrigued, and the next thing I knew, I was the rabbi of the 6th Street Synagogue in the East Village of Manhattan, 6th Street between 1st Avenue and Avenue A. And within a few months, I turned the synagogue into the Center for Jewish Arts and Literacy, and it became the #1 destination in New York for the merger of the arts and Jewish culture and Jewish religion. Every night of the week, except Friday night, we would have a class and then a concert or a poetry reading or an original play. It was wonderful when getting all sorts of world-class people who happened to live in the neighborhood to come and play, and everyone felt this was sort of home base. That lasted for about 3 years. And my family did not have as good a time as I did. We were living in Livingston, New Jersey at the time, had a beautiful home, had guests every Shabbat. Now I had to come and every Friday afternoon pack up and go into the city. We had to bring our food. We didn't really have any place to live there. We were sort of, what do they call it, couch surfing. And we had some people who would put us up, and we had to eat all our meals in the synagogue. My family did not like that at all. So I left after 3 years, but one of my congregants, while I was there, sent me an email about 6 months later and said that the synagogue where he grew up in Westport, Connecticut, was going to be looking for a new rabbi. He thought it would be a good fit. And here I am. Here I am. So shortly after arriving here, I realized that the best way to grow my synagogue would be to start sharing my music with the people in Westport. Instead of just going to New York and playing all the time, I would perform here weekly. So I looked for a venue, and you saw the scenes from The Spotted Horse. That was the first place that I played here, although Sunday brunch wasn't really the best venue for me. So I looked for another place. We ended up at a place called 323. It's been since closed and then opened up again as Hudson Malone. They're not having music, but there we really started not only a serious jazz program, commitment to serious programming. And I had Grammy award-winning artists coming here on a regular basis every Thursday night. I would bring in all my friends from my decades of playing, and they would come to Westport, and we developed a really good audience. And it was, I think, something that was transformational, not only for me personally, because I got to meet hundreds of people, for the synagogue, which got some new members of Jewish folks who thought they'd never step foot in the synagogue again, but decided to check out any synagogue that would have the jazz rabbi for their rabbi. And but also for the community, that we now had a serious music venue here. Shortly after that, we had an opportunity to purchase a very famous piano, a legendary piano. Actually, Channel 12 did a story on that too. So I'm going to show you that right now. And I think you'll find this pretty interesting. In a second while I find this. Okay, share screen. Not an accomplished video jock yet. Working on it. Here we go.
A group of jazz fans have banded together to preserve a piece of music history. News 12 Connecticut's Ted Copy has the unlikely story of how the group pulled an iconic piano from obscurity and gave it a new home at a Westport jazz club.
Fasten your seatbelt, we're gonna have a good time.
Each Thursday night at the restaurant 323 Main in Westport, a partnership plays out. Not only between these musicians and the audience, but in the story of how this piano got here. Many of these jazz fans chipped in to pay for this 1937 Steinway.
And the piano has sort of been like a rallying point.
That's Rabbi Greg Wall, known around Westport as the Jazz Rabbi. Wall says this 79-year-old piano has been a rallying point because it's no ordinary used Steinway. The rabbi says he first found out it was for sale this spring when the technician who had the daunting task of keeping the previous piano in tune told him about these iconic ivories.
Marco comes up to me and says, I know of a piano in New Canaan. It used to be at the Village Gate, a very famous jazz club.
A very famous club in Manhattan where a long list of very famous players used this piano over the years. A memorial plaque that came with the Steinway reads like a who's who of American jazz, including Thelonious Monk, Bill Evans, and Count Basie.
It's an art form that, at its best, is handed down from generation to generation.
Lifelong jazz fan Ellie Becker of Norwalk says at its roots, jazz is about history. And the history in these 88 keys so resonated with the audience here, they helped Rabbi Wall raise the $11,000 needed to buy the piano in just 1 week. For the professional saxophonist and host of Thursday Night Jazz, it goes beyond history and crosses into the spiritual.
We have to really consider that as much as the piano put out, maybe the piano absorbed from the touch of all these great artists now.
Artists who he says would no doubt cheer the fact that it's back in front of a jazz audience where it belongs. In Westport, Ted Copy, News 12, Connecticut.
So not only did we purchase the piano, or actually we, meaning the people of Fairfield County, Westport, Wilton, Norwalk, Fairfield, and much farther north and east and west, but we started a nonprofit group to provide stewardship for the piano initially, so it would be owned by an entity, and the Jazz Society of Fairfield County was born, Jazz FC. And Jazz FC later branched out into providing educational outreach, and we would frequently visit neighborhood studios in Bridgeport and work with high school students who were trying to really change their lives by putting a lot of attention into the arts. And they have a jazz program, and we would conduct master classes and workshops there. Occasionally we'd have the students come and open up for us at 323. When 323 closed, we moved the music series over to Longshore at the place called Pearl. Probably a lot of you have been there. Unfortunately, Pearl didn't survive the first part of COVID. But the series was going strong until March 12th, 2020. That was the last Jazz FC concert in Westport. We're looking for a new place to bring our piano, which, by the way, has now been restored. We raised an additional $15,000 from the fans to have the piano brought back to even better condition than when it rolled off the assembly line in 1937, because there are a lot of materials now that are available that are superior to what was available back then. But alas, the piano's been in storage all this time. The last thing that we worked on prior to being shut down by COVID was setting up a scholarship fund in the name of a dear friend of mine who passed away a few years ago. His name was Mickey Gollum, and some of you might have had the pleasure of meeting Mickey and his wife Kathy. He was a professional saxophonist, a very, very good one. And so we started the scholarship fund in his memory. And the last project we were doing was recording a CD to sell at Pearl to raise money. And I got a couple of Grammy award-winning artists to come down, and I'm just going to show you a little clip of the recording session for that. We have finally reached the point where it's safe to go back into the recording studio to finish the CD, not with recording the music, that was all done live, but with the editing and mixing that needs to be done to put it on the CD. And we look forward to being able to give out our first scholarship in the coming months. So enjoy this. Give me a second, and Margaret, if you'd like to interject while I try to get this video up on the screen, you could do that.
Well, I guess I'd just like to say, so far we're getting a lot of comments about how positively people feel about you. Some people have mentioned, of course, that they did see you. Everyone is so sad that 323 and Pearl are no longer places that you'll be able to perform, and hoping get that piano out of storage and get it in some place where someone can play it, and we can have something that we can all look forward to. As you
Absolutely.
say, we now can get out, so if we could perform. see you and your fellow musicians perform. It'd be wonderful.
And if anybody has an idea of a good venue, we'd like to go back to every Thursday night. I mean, after 5 years, it was a new Westport tradition. And some of you know my friend Melissa Newman. She would come and sing often, but we just had some of the greatest musicians on the planet there on a regular basis. And you know what? They have been contacting me saying, when is the series going to start again? They loved coming up here. And it wasn't for the money. Listen, they got paid something, but basically by the time their travel, the train fare and the travel time, they were subsidizing the music. And that's unfortunately what jazz musicians have been doing for all, their whole lives is investing everything they have into the music. Because as my friends and I have often said, well, what choice do we have? There's nothing we would rather be doing than playing the music. And thank God I've been able to support myself doing that. And but we play in Westport not to get rich. We do it to keep the music alive and to make sure that everybody has a chance to have their lives enriched by the music. So here is a live cut that is on the new record. Okay. So, yeah, that is going to be included on this CD. Every penny from the proceeds of the CD will go for the Mickey Gollum Memorial Fund to benefit young musicians from the inner city who have a chance to study music in college. So we're excited about that. So this is my roots. As I mentioned before, I didn't grow up in a traditionally observant Jewish home at all. And my religion was jazz. My religion was music. And through a bizarre turn of events, although in retrospect, I see the hand of the divine in every step of the way guiding me through here, even though I didn't know it at the time. But I ended up being a serious, observant Jew and a jazz musician. And when I became a rabbi, I realized that God had given me the ability to play music so I would be able to have something special to offer as a rabbi, as a teacher. In the role of clergy in Judaism traditionally was to be able to teach, to be an authority on Jewish law, and to have the congregants have a more meaningful Jewish life. So I tried to find ways that the music could actually bring people together to have a specifically Jewish experience, but without diluting the quality of the music. And for me, the essential jazz nature of it, the improvisatory spontaneity that I needed to feel satisfied from my musical experience. So I started coming up with projects that would combine my interests, my passion for Judaism and my passion for good music. And I started recording CDs that were based on my interpretation of classic Jewish texts. And in maybe 2007, 2008, I was playing a festival in Canada, in Toronto, and I met a gentleman came up to me and said, "Hey, how'd you like to jam with Rav Kook?" I thought, this guy kind crazy. Rabbi Avraham Yitzchak Kook had died in 1935. He was the first chief rabbi of Palestine, which went on to become the state of Israel. I didn't know that he was an incredible poet. I knew him as a great Talmudic scholar and a theologian, but it turns out that he also combined his passion for Judaism with the arts. And his art was the most musical form of literature, poetry. And I started checking out the poetry of Rav Kook, and I was enthralled. So we collaborated on a project, this gentleman whose name was Rabbi Yitzchak Marmerstein. And this project took the poems of Rav Kook and provided a basis for a live performance of the poetry, not with background music, but with music on the same level, simultaneously, to be equal partners. So I'm going to give you a taste of that right now.
Lord, just can't wait to see you again. So let's go.
Yaakov and Esav will come back over all the mehumot, all the activities of history.
I'm going to pause this for a second because I want to get the introduction. So we're performing, this is recorded in Jerusalem, and he's talking about a lesson that Rav Kook taught, that that Jacob, really the spiritual father of the Jewish people, and Yishmael, the spiritual father of the Muslim world, and Esau, the spiritual father of the Christian world, would all be reunited. And this was a prophecy. And Rav Kook really saw the big picture. And this song is about this poem is about his vision of peace and what we have in common, and why people need to get together and to use our essential humanity to create a better place. So this is Hatzofer, the one who desires the good.
He said in 1908 that the brotherly love of Yitzchak and Ishmael, Yaakov and Esav will come back over all the mehumot, all the activities of history. And our tool is tov, good. Hatzofeh letovah, the one who seeks the good. הטוב אני חושק, גחון רחביו יקסימני, שפתיו שושנים אני נושק, מראה הודו ירהיבני. הטוב המוחלט בלי די, באין קץ ומיצר וגבול, שאיננו נבדל מכל חי, שמכשיר בחסדו כל פסול. Absolute good without limitation, without end, constriction or boundary, that does not separate from anyone alive, and with its love fixes everything broken. שמכשיר בחסדו כל פסול.
So that was a very inspiring piece of poetry to become involved with. And a couple of years later, I had the opportunity to perform that live in Tel Aviv, but with a special guest. And the special guest is a gentleman named Bassam Barouni, who was a Palestinian rapper. And he was encouraged by the words of Rav Kook as we were. And I'm thrilled that we were able to capture the performance of this piece of the vision of reconciliation between different cultures. And I'm going to give you a little taste of that. Bassam translated Rav Kook's words into Arabic. So you'll hear it in Hebrew and in Arabic at the same time. Let's see if I can dig this up here without taking too much of your time.
Again, it's so wonderful to see you perform in different countries. And I never would have expected a rapper to be part of this, but music really is a universal language. So it's wonderful to see you take advantage of that.
Thank you. Here we go. You hear that the song is, we're doing it slower now than the version you heard. The music is never going to be played in the right place. This was a concert for peace in Tel Aviv.
בגאון רהביו יקסימני, שפתיו של שנים אני נושם, ובאר אותו ירהיבני. الخير أنا أشتهي يسحرني بمجده، شفايف ورود نقبلها كعروق تثيرني، الطوف المخلص اللي داي.
So that was an exciting moment, and it proved to me what I already knew, that if people would have a chance to share music, food, art, culture together, they realize that they have a lot more in common than they do apart. And I know many Israeli and Palestinian musicians who make music together regularly and are the best of friends, and both sides are equally appalled at the fact that there has to be violence. So we'll continue to pray for peace. Yeah, so this is a way that the music is combining with some of my spiritual aims and desires. I've also found that the music itself, and especially the Jewish connection to it, has reached far beyond the Jewish audience. Now, that last concert you saw, even though we had the Palestinian collaborator with us, Bassam, but the audience in Tel Aviv, for the most part, were Jews. They were people who lived in Tel Aviv. But I found that when I brought my Jewish-inspired music to other places in the world that did not have large Jewish populations, and especially in places that did before the war, and then unfortunately most of the Jews of those countries were killed during the Holocaust, the subsequent generations grew up and realized that a vital part of their country's history and culture came out of the relationship between the Jews and the Gentiles in that country. So, for example, Poland is one of those. Poland was a country where Jews lived for hundreds and hundreds of years. In the beginning of the 21st century, there was a movement among non-Jewish Poles to try to become familiar with Jewish culture. It would be akin to someone being a music fan here in the United States and not having access to any Black musicians. I mean, all the music that we listen to today, except for your Western classical music, but certainly all American music, has a heavy ingredient, and there was a heavy Jewish influence in the music of Poland as well. So anyway, here's a little street party in Krakow, Poland. And then this will be the last piece I share with you, and then I'll be glad to take some of your questions. So give me a second. Let me pull this up. Okay, there we go. Little street party. There were about 25,000 people at this festival in Krakow. Pretty much an entirely non-Jewish audience, although there are maybe 100 Jews who live in Krakow to this day. But out of the 25,000, very few. All right. So that music was actually a Hasidic melody that you might hear if you went into a number of synagogues. And we sort of jazzed it up a bit. I don't know if we necessarily, that's certainly not the pure jazz that you've heard before, that I've played earlier today, but it's sort of a more of a contemporary mixture of funk and actually some West African music. It's a lot of the rhythms that you heard there were coming from African music as well. My journey as a musician is still in progress. When I finish my tenure here in Westport, and I don't know how long that's going to be, the synagogue is finally building a new building that's been about 18 years in the works. Don't ask why it took so long, but the fact is, if you drive down Ludlow Street, that short block between Kings Highway and the Post Road West, you'll see our synagogue rising. And we're so thrilled, and we are the house of friends. Everybody is welcome. You don't have to be Jewish to come; you just have to come. And we look forward to being able to become a great resource for the community, spiritually, artistically, socially, and hopefully we can all celebrate peace on earth, because it's the most important commodity. It's the most precious commodity. It seems to be the one that's most short supply. And I'd like to close off my part of the presentation before I get to your questions with a piece written by Fairfield County native, legendary composer Horace Silver, who graduated from Norwalk High School. And he wrote a piece that he recorded probably first in 1959, 1960, around there. And it's called Peace. So I'm going to play that for you, and then we'll take your questions. Thank you very much for inviting me here today. And it's been a thrill to share a little taste of my life with you.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful presentation, and you really showed us so much that we all can enjoy and look forward to learn from the future. We have a few comments. I'll just summarize them briefly and then go on to some questions. Obviously, people loved your music. They were impressed by your work as a rabbi and as a community member, and really bringing so much to our local community. You know, a lot of talent, and also people very impressed by the way you merged careers that people might think of as very divergent into one coherent and complementary career, I would have to say. So we hope you stay in Westport for a long time.
Thank you.
And we look forward, but we especially look forward to knowing where people might see you in the future. So we'll have to find out where that would be.
Yeah, we don't know. If anybody has any ideas, please let us know.
Yeah, I know, right? You know, well, maybe we'll have someplace outside. I don't know if you perform outside. That would maybe be a way to start. But
sure.
You know, we definitely would want to see you. But so questions. I'll start with a few questions about your musical career. You performed in so many different countries, and you've performed over a few years, and you've perform with different musicians. Can you talk about the differences among those different aspects? Again, the different locations, the different, if things have changed, or maybe they haven't changed over time, or different musicians you've been with.
So I find that when we get out of the United States, people have a different relationship with music, and especially with what we would call art music, classical music, jazz, music that you can't dance to. And they will come out and listen any night of the week, as opposed to the United States, where concert night is on a weekend night, Friday, Saturday night. Those are the nights people go, and the rest of the time, people tend to cocoon a bit and watch Netflix or watch TV. TV is very, very popular here. It used to be, when I first started playing in Europe, that most countries only had 2 channels. Before, the cable was everywhere, and streaming, there wasn't a lot of choice, and people would go out, and that's how they would get their entertainment, their stimulation is going out. So that was a big difference I noticed with between European audiences and American audiences. They also tended to be more adventuresome, that I wouldn't have to play as conservatively in Europe as I would in the United States, except for the East Village of New York, which of course, New York City is a little different. That's the music capital of the world. But, you go even 20 miles outside of Manhattan and people's tastes tend to be a little more traditional. But there's nothing wrong with that. I love that just as much. I also noticed that in the poorer countries in Eastern Europe, like the Czech Republic, like Slovakia, places like that, the music was a big event. It was. It seems to be that there. It's something that markedly added to the quality of people's lives, and there was less Western influence in those countries. It's, if you walk down the streets and in Hamburg or in Brussels or in Amsterdam, you'd see the same American icons. Everyone wanted to have the same things that we enjoyed here in the United States. But I found out in some of the countries that had not reached that level of prosperity, that their local culture seemed to be more on display, and I really like that. It's really tough to see our American culture swallow up a lot of really valuable, beautiful things. I think in the past 4 or 5 years, we've seen a move among our American artists who have an ethnic component to their past to accentuate that more in their work and not to downplay it anymore. I think that's a positive. It's a positive step. It could be a result of the multicultural curriculum that we've seen in the schools over the past 25 years. But now I think that our own art here in the country is all the richer for it. So that's some of the things that I noticed. Playing in Israel is always a thrill for me. Just to be able to go around and all of the places in the Bible are right there, and I still get the chills every time I go, and I try to go every year. Last year, actually, I did go the beginning of 2020, maybe about 6 weeks before we shut down for COVID. I was in Israel. Not doing a tour, though. I was studying with my then 18-year-old son. He's 19 now, and I have 3 children. They all studied in Israel for a while after high school, and I made a point every year of going to their school and studying with them for a week. So that was nice. Anyway, a little too lengthy response to your question, but have any more, Margaret, that you'd like to?
Yeah, without putting you on the spot to talk about favorite places where you've performed, and we know, of course, Westport would be at the top of that list.
Absolutely.
But other than Westport, are there any particular performances you've had, or locations, or musicians you've been with, or anything that really stands out to you as being at the top of your list?
It's really hard to say. I tend to remember the actual music more than the location. Although I love some of the locations, they all have something very, very special. I played at some huge major festivals, the North Sea Jazz Festival, the Montreal Jazz Festival. So that's nice for the sheer spectacle of playing for tens of thousands of people at once. I once played at an old Roman village in the south of the mid-south of France, called a town called Vienne, and we played in an old Roman amphitheater built into the hillside. That was kind of exciting. I love playing in Belgium because they have the best beer in the world. I love drinking good beer. I love Krakow. I loved, yeah. They're all great. They're all great.
Okay, we have another career, actually, about a question about the early part of your career. You studied music and had a career certainly in that area. When you were in high school and deciding where to go to college or what sort of career you might have, and we know you studied music. We're wondering what kind of reaction you had from adults and would people ever say, I mean, I'm sure they would have been more than excited if you said you were going to go to study to be a rabbi, but didn't anyone ever say,
no, they wouldn't have, I think they probably would have got a worse response than a musician. Yeah. Okay. My parents, my father wanted me to be a successul businessman, and my mother wanted me to be a lawyer. I got a late start in music, so it wasn't a natural thing. Maybe some of the folks on this call have children or even grandchildren that are natural musicians from like age 7 or 8. They're playing and they're really talented. So it's sort of inevitable, if they keep it up, that they're going to go into music. I picked up saxophone when I was 14 years old, and my parents tried to dissuade me from that. And the more they tried to dissuade me, the more I fell in love with music. So it was only a couple of years later, when I was 16 and starting to look ahead at graduating from high school and planning my next move, I decided I wanted to be a professional musician. My parents were not happy at all. I applied to 3 schools. I applied to Ithaca College. They have a nice conservatory, and the Hart College of Music here in Connecticut at the University of Hartford. And UMass was sort of my backup, my safety school. So I got accepted to all 3. And my parents said, well, why don't you go to UMass and then you could transfer to these other schools. They were hoping that I would meet some nice young lady and forget about going into music. They even sent a friend of theirs to come. He drove all the way to Amherst from Boston to take me out to lunch. He takes me out to lunch and he starts telling me about his friend who was a professional musician, and he had a horrible life and he couldn't support his family. And finally, at age 55, he had to get a job working, somewhere. All his friends, were buying second homes, and he could barely make it. Anyway, that just made me want to work at it harder. I did make a deal with my mother. I don't know why I did this, a moment of weakness. I said, if I'm not making a good living as a musician by age 27, that I would go to law school. I moved to the New York area when I graduated from conservatory in 1982. I guess I was 23 years old. And 4 years later, I was the band leader at the King Cole Room at the St. Regis Hotel, 55th Street, 5th Avenue. My band had a health insurance plan and a retirement plan. Wow. And we were featured on the front page of Crane's New York Business as a successful way to be professional musicians, to run your own business. So, and my mother was very proud of me, and she still is. And so,
glad to hear.
But it's tough, and I'm so fortunate that I'm able to support my family through music, because, as you know, it's a tough way to go. It's like becoming you want to be a professional athlete. Very few could do it. So I've been blessed, really have.
Yeah, well, we're so glad you were able to do that. We have a few other questions about your career as a rabbi. Sure. We often hear religious leaders of all religions today talk about the fact that their congregations are disproportionately older, or they may have young families where they the children tend to stay on until some formal point, like a Bar Mitzvah or a confirmation or a coming of age ceremony or something. And then attendance drops off until people are, sort of gray-haired and looking toward the end of their life. Do you find that your ability to use music, which is often, something that appeals to the so-called younger generation, makes you better able to attract people in those age groups?
It's a great question. So I'd have to say no.
No. Okay.
For a couple different reasons. One is that the prime day of assembly at the synagogue is on the Sabbath, and we don't play musical instruments at our synagogue on the Sabbath. So a lot of people don't relate that way. And plus, I'm a jazz musician, and jazz is not so popular among the younger generation, but we have had a resurgence of young people in our synagogue. And in fact, COVID, as horrible as the experience was, in some ways was a gift to us. And, a lot of people could look and they could see gifts there as well. Things happen for a reason. We had a resurgence of young families join the synagogue. And people that had moved out of Manhattan or Brooklyn and places like that they had their children in small apartments, very expensive small apartments, and they realized that they could, sell those apartments and they could buy a house even in Westport. That's how expensive, things were in Williamsburg or the Upper West Side. And now we've got a lot of young children and young families, and I can clearly see the next generation. Plus, since the 8 years I've been here, we've done a good job at retaining young people after bar and bat mitzvah. And if you were to come to my synagogue on any Sabbath, you would see that the teenagers not only are coming, but they've been empowered to take a leadership position. And so it's really great to see. And
great. Well, we're so happy you're able to do that, and we hope that continues. We have another set of questions about the reactions you get to the fact that you have this sort of dual career thing. How do your the fellow musicians or your audiences react when they find you're a rabbi? And on the other side of that, how do other rabbis or people involved in religious observation react to your career as a jazz musician?
Mm-hmm. So I think that it gives me some, like, what they call street cred in a way, because a lot of times clergy are, how to say this? It's almost like they're dehumanized a little bit. It's like, oh, that's the clergy. And, they're different than everybody else. A lot of clergy people don't really have friends in the community other than other clergy. And, so I find the music is something that most people can identify with. But although since I come from a non-observant background, I grew up going to public school and having the same experience as everybody else. So now, because I grew up with Rolling Stones and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and things like that, so I have that bond with people, in my age and a few years younger and older. So that helps. But it's a tool. The music is a tool. It's a conversation starter. Other clergy inevitably will ask me to come and play for free, and they don't realize that I do this for a living, and I want to relate to them as a clergy person, not a musician. So it's some situations I really play down the fact that I'm a professional musician, and I try to use it just to grow my own community. Or else I would never have a chance to do the other things I enjoy. I have 5 grandchildren, and I love spending time with them. I'm an avid scuba diver and cyclist and swimmer, and these are parts of that need nurturing as well. Because without all of them, I wouldn't be me.
Yeah, you certainly would, and we're very happy you are the you that you are. So thank you so much for sharing. So the one thing I'm not happy about is we are out of time. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to say goodbye. And we all hope we'll see you again in whatever setting. And goodbye to all the wise women out there. And thank you for participating. And
Hi, wise women. Thank you so
Wall.
much for having me. God bless all of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
That
you
was
so much.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.